Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. I know it's been a minute since I've made a video. My family and I recently moved to Colorado and to sort of start a whole new chapter. So we've been, very distracted and focused on just packing and moving and, going through that whole process, which is never an easy process. But the dust is sort of settling now, and I thought about, I should get back on here and do some more videos and talk more about spirituality, non-duality, Dr. David Hawkins, and studying his teachings. And so I'll start this video but just by saying that on my way to Colorado, I got the opportunity to stop in Sedona for 3 days and visit with some old friends. And I got the opportunity to also go spend some time at Dr. David Hawkins' ranch, which I haven't seen in, it's been like 7 years since I've been out there. So I got the opportunity to go sit in that energy field of what it's like to be at his ranch, at his property where he lived. And I got to see his wife Susan, which was a huge blessing. It's always just awesome to see her. She holds a very special place in my heart. And she allowed me the opportunity to sit with Dr. David Hawkins' little relic box for about 20 minutes and just be in that energy field. So that was just amazing to have that opportunity. And it couldn't have been a better trip to go see Sedona again. I got to see his ranch. I got to see Susan Hawkins. I got to sit with Doc's relics, and it was like everything I could have possibly dreamed of in visiting Sedona once again, since I haven't been out there since he passed away in 2012. So anyways, I got the opportunity to do that, and now we're here in Colorado. And the subject of this video, what I kind of wanted to talk about, was this dark spiritual experience that came up recently moving here. And we had some family out here and everything. But once the family left, I had like this tremendous stack of grief arise. All this suppressed grief just sort of came up, and this really intense feeling of homesickness arose. And man, I must have cried my eyes out for like 10 or 12 hours. It was intense. And with the grief, the ego sort of hooked me with a story of my life and just kind of really tried to, grasp hold of this consciousness and kind of re-identify with the ego, in a very strong way. So, because the ego has obviously been losing traction, and you're working on yourself spiritually, and, and like that identifying with a space in which all thoughts occur has been definitely revealed itself stronger and stronger, where I notice that which I am is the infinite silence out of which thinkingness arises. It's like realizing that which you are is this non-linear, infinite silent space, and that's become increasingly more obvious, more and more lately. And so anyways, of course, that's going to really piss the ego off. The last thing it wants is for us, for consciousness to return to its source. So anyways, this grief arose, and the energy field of grief calibrates about 75 on Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness, which is it's a sub 100 emotion, totally natural emotion. There's nothing wrong with grief. It's going to arise if our intention is that of enlightenment and realizing the self with a capital S. But I feel like once that grief really took hold and came up, which is an energy field of 75, the ego, in that energy field, the ego gained a ton of traction. And it sort of hooked this consciousness with a story, sort of like oh, you're still working at the same place you've always worked. You've been doing this sort of job since you were 21 years old. You're 35 years old and you're not making that much money. So it's sort of hooked me with this story, pretty intensely. And this consciousness sort of experienced this state of despair, where I was crying my eyes out for 10 or 12 hours. And eventually after some intense prayer, the voice of reason sort of came back and sanity sort of restored, and I was able to pull myself out of this story that was self-created. And this voice just kind of came at me and said, just live one day at a time. That's all that's necessary. That's all we have anyways. So once this voice of reason came back, once the grief sort of disappeared, then I had this underlying feeling of homesickness that was still very intense. And so what I did was I just sort of recalled Doc's teachings of surrender and letting go. and just let go of resisting this feeling of homesickness, you know. So I sat with it for, it only took about an hour or two maybe. Sorry, my cat's in the room jumping around. But it only took like an hour or two of sitting with this homesickness feeling. And then the homesickness feeling dissipated and dissolved. And then I was left with a feeling of peace, and I've been fine ever since. But I just wanted to share this experience because it was just a kind of a really cool experience to have, you know. It was extremely painful, extremely anguishing. And, you know, this consciousness almost went into like a state of hell, really. I mean, it got pretty dark one night. But it was fascinating to see like the inner workings of the ego and how it sort of catches hold. And, you know, it was a learning process to see how a story could sort of take over our consciousness so quickly. You know, it was like one moment I was fine, and the next moment the ego is just spinning this whole story about this entity called Josh, you know, that we think we are, or whatever your name is, you know, and just sort of rehooking you with this story. And then it's like a snowball effect after that. So it was fascinating, you know. And I feel like anytime we're suffering or struggling with something, we need to you know, not lose sight of our surrender practice or our letting go practice, you know, to not allow the mind to create stories, you know, because if you're looking at thoughts, you're looking at the ego. And what the ego loves to do is to create endless stories about oneself, you know. It's in love with itself. It's, you know, the ego thinks it is God. And that comes from Dr. David Hawkins' teaching. So, you know, when you're really practicing and identifying with the infinite, silent, nonlinear space, and that, you know, it's become very obvious that which I am has no form. I could see you know, if I sit here for a moment and just kind of be quiet, I could sense the infinite formless space and see that which is, well, that there is no I here. There is no I in that space. There's no personal self in that space. And that's sort of been the spiritual practice lately, is just sort of maintaining that awareness and never losing sight of that infinite silence. So you can see how that would really piss off the ego, you know, because in that space there is no story. There's no personal self. There's no suffering. There's no problems. There's just nothing but peace, stillness, and silence, and presence in that space. So, you know, the ego is going to do whatever it can to sort of reestablish its story, and you know, try to get consciousness to believe in a personal self again. So anyways, I just wanted to share this experience and, you know, what's been going on lately with myself. And now the dust has settled again, and we're here in Colorado. And but anyways, the emphasis of this video is just to talk about, you know, how to handle the energy field of grief again, you know, to allow that feeling to come up, to allow yourself to cry, you know, just allow the tears to flow. And then handling the feeling of homesickness, you know, it's sort of a funky feeling in your solar plexus area, in your stomach area. So if you let go of resisting that sensation, you know, constantly, eventually it'll dissolve and you're left with a feeling of peace, you know. So you don't, you know, I think a lot of people resist that homesickness feeling, and they end up having to move back to wherever they came from. But to realize that home is everywhere, home is every place, and, you know, our true home is that of the nonlinear silence that's ever present, that's just below our thinkingness, that which we are is not different than the infinite context. So that's our true home. So wherever the body moves in the linear realm, you know, is sort of irrelevant. You know, it doesn't really, nothing really changes. You know, your scenery changes, but the routine is pretty much the same. You know, you still go to work, you come home, you take care of your children, you take them to school, you do your, you know, same stores are pretty much everywhere. You go to Costco, you go grocery shopping, you know, so all that's kind of the same. But, you know, sometimes we have the desire to want to experience different scenery or settings, or, you know, perhaps move to places with maybe greater opportunity. But anyways, you know, the primary feeling of home is, you know, living in that infinite silent space that's below thinkingness. And it's a matter of shifting your mental gaze from the realm of thinkingness to just underneath the waves. And that was a clip I heard recently from Dr. Hawkins, was saying that you're not going to stop the waves, you know, you're not going to stop thinkingness. So trying to stop thinkingness is really a waste of time. All you have to do is shift your mental gaze from the thought field and look below the thoughts. You know, the thoughts can still go on, but below the thoughts is that infinite silent, you know, invisible space formless space of no thingness. And if we keep integrating what that means and really looking at what Dr. Hawkins has said about that infinite silence, it becomes increasingly more apparent to us what that space exactly is. And it's the ultimate feeling of freedom. So anyways, that's true home. That's where I feel like, my intention is to live in that space nonstop, to carry it with me as that which I am. So anyways, I hope this is kind of a fun, cool video for you guys, and thanks for listening, and I look forward to doing some more videos. I know it's been a while. So yeah, if you're experiencing any kind of homesickness, let go of resisting the sensation. If you have grief coming up in your life, allow yourself to cry, and don't forget that what you are is that infinite, silent, nonlinear, still space, and keep integrating that and become that space. So anyways, that's what I work on, and you guys have a good day. All right, take care.